So could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where is your hometown? How does it feel like to be here?
Of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Øystein. It's a very classical Norwegian name, so if people have some troubles pronouncing it, I just usually say, call me Austin, because that's more international. I am from Norway. Where in Norway is a little bit more complicated. I was born in the north of Norway. Then my family moved down to to Oslo, the capital, when I was 4 years old. So I've been raised in Oslo. So I usually say Oslo when people ask me. But right now, before I came here, I'm studying on the west coast of Norway in a city called Stavanger. So I've been living a bit across the country, and Norway is a very long and diverse country. So whenever I go to new places, it's completely different. So I'm used to traveling a lot within the country as well.
And what do you study here?
My bachelor from back home in Norway was tourism management, and then I pursued in the same university. My master degree is called Service Leadership in International Business.
Oh.
And I'm on my third semester now, on an exchange semester. So when I go back to Norway in late December, I will start my thesis, which I'm a bit nervous about, but it should be fine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's first hard, but then you get used to it.
Exactly.
Okay, so most of the people know your country about the Vikings, and does the Viking era impact on your everyday life, or it's just a part of your history?
Oh, that's a good question actually. I would say it has some influence maybe in the way Norwegians behave, because we can come across as quite cold and direct when you first meet us, but we warm up eventually, and we love drinking, which the Vikings did too. So I'm not sure if like those aspects is connected to the Vikings, but it's definitely some similarities.
Okay. And did you enjoy the Viking series, or have you seen it?
I have seen several Viking series, because we also have some Norwegian versions of it back home, which are turned more into like comedy series as well. And I think it's a really, really cool history. And of course, there are some dark sides about the Viking history too, but looking at it from a serious perspective, I find it really, really interesting.
It is.
People used to believe, and it's not that many decades ago either actually, that there lived these huge trolls in the mountains and that they kind of made up the mountain. And when it got dark, they came to life and they would like walk around. They were usually not very dangerous, but you know they could be several hundred meters tall, so you should watch out. And when the sunrise came the next day, they had to go back to their hiding places, because if they were exposed to sunlight, they would just freeze in that position. So I actually think that's one of the like the myths around the mountain, actually Troll Tongue, which I talked about earlier, that the troll almost got back to his hiding place, but froze in that position before or when sunrise came. So I actually worked in some souvenir shops in Oslo a couple of years ago, and by far the most sold items was these tiny troll statues. Everyone who came to Norway like talked to me about trolls and asked me if I knew any trolls, and you get a lot of weird questions when working in the tourism industry. But yeah, so trolls is definitely something that people think about. Like it's trolls and Vikings. That's usually the two most important things, and of course the nature.
Yeah, and nothing about mythology like the gods or Odin, Thor.
Not as much that I know of. It's more, I don't know, like natural wonders in general is usually what the Norwegians believe in. And when you go to Norway, I kind of understand why when I also was traveling around Norway, because like once again, I know I'm biased, but the Norwegian nature it's spectacular. There is no other word for it. And when you see these mountain creations and these deep fjords and really, really high mountains, you really start to think like this, it has to be something weird here, especially in the olden days before they could, I don't know, Google stuff. And of course, when you also have the northern lights in winter when it's dark, and the midnight sun in the summer, of course that raises questions like earlier in the days, like how is this possible? So it was not that much methodology in that sense, I would say, but definitely more wonders about natural phenomena and trolls and other creatures. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some traditions that or customs that you still practice today in Norway?
Oh, we have like most of the traditions, unfortunately, have started to become less and less popular because if you go just a couple of decades back, it was a lot of traditions that was very typical for Scandinavian countries, both around Christmas and Easter, but they have slightly like disappeared. But I would definitely say that a huge tradition in Norway is to really, really celebrate our constitutional day like to the fullest.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 1814, on the 17th of May, we gained independence from Denmark. So that's kind of our like Norway's day, and everyone gets dressed up in our traditional clothes, which is called bunad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't personally have one because the men usually wear like a nice suit. And it's basically a day of eating a lot of good food, hanging with friends. If you are our age, it's usually a day used for drinking from morning to evening. And you just celebrate like Norway's history and that we actually just a couple of years ago celebrated 200 years as an independent country. So that's one of the biggest traditions. But apart from our national day, it's not that much that's typically Norwegian. We have something called Midsummer or Sankthansaften for my Norwegian friends out there maybe, which is celebrated on the brightest day of the year, so the night until the 23rd of June, I believe, which is basically to celebrate like the summer season. Historically, it was actually made to drive evil spirits away because we made these huge bonfires, but now it's basically just to gather family around, light a huge fire, and then just celebrate the brightest part of the season, because in winter, as most people probably know, Norway gets quite dark.
And what is your favorite holiday?
Oh, I am very, very, very fan of Christmas. So I think I have to choose Christmas actually, because my family, although my family lives all over the country, we do have our own traditions, and it's kind of the same every year. Like we're not afraid of change or anything, but we just usually gather the big family around, eat a lot of good food. In Norway, we celebrate Christmas on the 24th, so everything basically happens on the 24th. So huge Christmas dinner, presents, which always took forever to start opening when I was a kid, because the grown-ups had to do the dishes and relax before the gifts could start. But and of course the snow. I think that's one of the things that I miss the most maybe right now is the snow, because I was FaceTiming with my parents a couple of days ago, and they were like sitting in the living room and I could see the snow outside, and they have like half a meter of snow on the ground.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, I want to be there.
Yeah, well, we don't have much snow, unfortunately. About some cuisine, do you have any special dish that maybe Europeans find interesting or unique?
Definitely. It's kind of similar to the previous traditions too, that it's not as common in like our everyday life anymore, but especially on the west coast where now I currently study, they have this national dish which is basically a sheep head. So you have the head of the sheep, I think you boil it, and then you add some vegetables and stuff, but when you eat it, you are basically staring into the eyes of a dead sheep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's that's maybe the most interesting. I have never tried it in my entire life. I actually almost don't know any people who eat it at all, so it's not a typical dish. I would say of the more typical ones, well, of course, you can't get away from salmon. I mean, we have, fun fact actually, Norway has the world's second longest coastline in the world, just after Canada. So we have a lot of fish, which comes in all varieties. So especially up in the north of Norway, where my dad's side of the family lives, dried cod is actually very, very popular. Where you might have seen some pictures of these huge wooden racks where they hang their fish. It was very popular many, many hundreds of years ago, and it's still a tradition today. So especially my dad's side of the family, they usually eat this dried fish in all around the year actually. So yeah, fish and sheep is usually what the traditional Norwegian dishes contain.
About fishes, so do you and your family like fishing, or is it a tradition in Norway? Or?
It's very popular in Norway, at least. I love fishing. I have to admit that I'm still not 100% comfortable with like gutting the fish and cutting it open, but I'm getting there. My dad kind of laughs at me sometimes because I still need to wear rubber gloves, but he just uses his hands and go all Viking style maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I love to fish. None of my family members actually have a boat, but we have a lot of family friends with boats. Not in Oslo, because there you have to wait for like 10 years and pay a huge amount of money just to get a place for your boat. But up in the north where my dad lives, it's we usually go fishing a couple times a year. We used to have a cat as well, so we used to fish for the cat. Very spoiled cat. But yeah, fishing is really, really fun.
Do you have a favorite city in Norway, or a favorite place to go, like for hiking or some outdoor activities?
Oh, my favorite city, I know I'm biased, but I have to choose Oslo. Because it's the only big city that Norway has. And even though it's Norway's biggest city, it's still relatively small compared to other European capitals. It's around 750,000 people in Oslo. But it's a very vibrant city. So even though it's relatively small and it's cold and dark in winter, you always feel like stuff is going on. You can always go to cultural events. It's also quite a big airport there, so you can travel to all around the world. And for hiking, it's very typical Norwegian actually to have a cabin, so like a small house, usually along the coast or up in the mountains, where you go in your holidays or you just want to relax. And my mom, she has a cabin in this mountain area in the south of Norway called Blefjell. And there's really beautiful because in winter we have the cross-country ski tracks right outside our door, so you can just take on your skis, go 20 meters, and you're in the middle of this huge web of different ski tracks. But if you want to hike by foot, then I feel like the study town that I'm living in now is perfect, because two of the most popular mountains in Norway are just a couple of miles away from that city. It's one of them is called the Pulpit Rock. It's basically a completely flat mountain where you can sit with your feet dangling 600 meters above the fjord below. And the other one, I don't remember what was the English name for it, but it's called, the Troll Tongue, of course, Trolltunga. Which is as weird as it sounds, because the mountain kind of looks like a troll, and the top is kind of the tongue sticking out. You can walk out on the tongue, and the views are amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And do you like Hungary, or what is your experience so far in Hungary?
I was actually surprised how similar, at least, like the behavior of the Hungarian people is very similar to Norwegians, because when I got here, of course the language is way different, but like people usually act like Norwegians. Like when you first approach them, they might not want to talk to you right away, but they're not rude or anything. But when you start to talk to them, or they have like a couple of beers in their system, then it's way different. So I thought it was really interesting to see the similarities between Norway and Hungary in that sense. And I have also actually been to Hungary 2 times before before I came here. Only in Budapest, unfortunately. I actually this year learned that it's called Budapest because the S is pronounced with sh and not S. But Budapest is a very beautiful city, a huge city of course, with beautiful architecture and very nice nightlife as well. But I was also surprised that there are no real, or maybe some people disagree with me, but there are no real mountains in Hungary. I feel like it's a lot of hills, like tall hills, but no mountains. So when I got here, I thought that maybe I could find some nice hiking opportunities. And I actually was invited to my faculty, the business and economics faculty here. They celebrate 20 years this year. So we were on this 20-kilometer hike for 20 years a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, oh, nice, 20 kilometers, like finally a proper hike. But we just basically walked up and down small hills and through a neighborhood over there and through a neighborhood over there. So it was nice to walk with people, but I kind of missed the proper hiking.
Yeah, okay, for you these are not so high mountains, but for us these are mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have tried any Hungarian dishes?
I actually had tried, excuse my pronunciation, but goulash before I came here. I tried the stew version of goulash, which I thought was really nice. I still want to try langos. I haven't tried that yet. It looks very nice. Um, it's not a food though, but I was very quickly introduced to palinka as well. I had a couple of shots in my hands before I could even blink. First time I went to Gesti, the pub. Hungarian beer. Like that's also the thing that I was surprised about is I knew Hungary was cheaper than Norway, but the alcohol prices here are like 1/5 of the Norwegian prices. So when I went to the pub the first time, it was kind of dangerous because, well, you know, it's cheap. The car was in my pocket, very easily available. But it's definitely a lot of food and drink in Hungary that's really tasty and really cheap as well. So at least for me. So I was actually positively surprised by the cuisine in Hungary.
So thank you so much for participating in our podcast. And actually, I can't wait to visit Norway one day because actually I have a bucket list place there called Lofoten Island.
Oh yeah, that's very close to my dad's side of the family, so you should definitely go. I will send you a list with recommendations if you go there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.